Hello, everyone. This is Keith Stone with the Center for Hellenic Studies, and I'm here again with Greg Nagy and Sarah and Elan and Janet for office hours for HeroesX, version 11 of our HeroesX project. And we're discussing today hours 13, 14, and 15, the discussion questions for those. And I won't read all three at the beginning like I usually would. I'm going to just read one to begin with.
That's a wise move, yeah.
So for hour 13, the question is, do you think that the ancient Greeks had the capacity to think of true happiness without thinking about the heroes they worshipped? What have folks been saying about that? That's a... Well, I know where you're going with that, Greg, but...
There's one comment that ties the story of Cleobis and Biton from this hour. And it the participant highlights the importance of seasonality and timeliness in ancient Greek culture. So, and as the Panathenaic festival occurred every 4 years in Athens, she's wondering if this is all tied with the concept of being albios and seasonality. So, in that respect, yes. She agrees that it's tied. So, what do you think?
I certainly am very sympathetic to that interpretation because, after all, ancient Greek heroes were larger than life, and they do a lot of questionable things, morally questionable things, but then a lot of morally admirable things. But because they're larger than life, it means that they're models for our own emotional formation. And I just love the way in the era of Aristotle, when you say the Greek word pathos, and you're thinking of yourself as an ordinary person, well, it's one of your emotions, such as happiness. Happiness can be pathos. But when you think of heroes in tragedy, well, it's so much larger than life that you like to think of it all together, and you say passion. Well, you translate it sometimes as passion because the hero, he or she, is so much larger than life. And if you're larger than life, you can't think of any one particular emotion of a hero, but kind of all of them.
That's, I think, perhaps one of the things as another participant has been thinking about, and brings up Plato's cavern and the idea of our world being shades, whereas the heroes of the heroic age are the ones truly blessed, and gives an example of a wedding. So an ordinary person at their wedding then is like a reflection of Hector and Andromache, or Aphrodite and Apollo, as we saw in the poetry of Sappho. And so that's almost like a reflection of a reflection of a reflection, isn't it?
Oh, I love it. Yes, I think that's a very elegant way of schematizing it. I love it.
How about question 14? Unless we should linger a little bit longer, no? I'm going to read it first, yes.
Okay, go ahead.
The question is, if you compare the lament of Achilles over Patroclus with the lament of Briseis, which of the two laments would you consider to be more artistic as a song?
One of the participants brought up female and male perspectives on lamentation. And for Briseis' case, insecurity for her future, her being a slave already, now she's going to anticipate more problems.
Yes, yes.
So there's more pathos, perhaps, in her lament than in Achilles.
Yes,
seems to be the idea there.
And I so sympathize with that because, after all, I think we can all understand that kind of sorrow much more easily than Achilles' sorrow. But I worry that in the case of ancient Greek song culture, it's such a predominant sorrow that Achilles has. And in the book, Ancient Greek Hero in 24 Hours, I like to describe Achilles as the man of constant sorrow. and his sorrow is so much bigger than life. This relates to what we were talking about earlier about happiness. Now, let's try the same thing with sorrow. When a hero has sorrow, it's just so much bigger than any sorrow that we can experience. And somehow, Briseis' sorrow is, by the very fact that we can relate to it so much, is, I almost want to say, less heroic than the sorrow of Achilles. By less heroic, I mean simply that Briseis is less important a hero when all is said and done than Achilles is. Okay, I've said that, but I still like what the participant says, because I can relate to what the participant says. I can relate to the lament of Briseis much more than I can relate to the lament of Achilles, but I should relate to the lament of Achilles in terms of ancient Greek song culture, probably more. So it's a tough one.
Is the term pothé, a longing, then very significant?
Yeah.
This peasant's brought that up as something that comes up with reference to Achilles, but not to Briseis.
Right, exactly, yeah. That's very well said, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's also one comment that the laments of Briseis and Achilles, we see a parallel grief and a parallel loss for each speaks of what the dead Patroclus meant to them while he lived. Yes. And in their shared sorrow, each one echoes the other. So
yes. And in general, the group lament, which is led by Briseis, is something that can be so easily individualized. The stylized chorus of women who antiphonally sing in response to the lament of Briseis are all lamenting their individual sadnesses, which we don't get to see on a one-on-one basis because they're the chorus. But I love the way in the original Greek it says, well, the prophasis, the pretext, was to sing for Patroclus, but each of the women who was participating in this lament led by Briseis was lamenting her own personal misfortune. And that gets almost non-heroic because we don't see the heroic stature of these people accompanying Briseis. So it's easier for us to empathize with them as if they were one of us. That's the beauty of choruses in tragedy too, is that we, the post-heroic people who are taking in the tragedy, can relate to the chorus the way we cannot relate directly to the larger-than-life heroes.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say that it's a trick question. That
it is.
You know, they're both equally artistic because they both take place within this art form of Homeric epic.
Yes.
Yeah. So they're both kind of elevated by it and all of a piece, as it were. I know that's kind of a cop out of an answer. But.
Well, how about this? Instead of saying a trick question, how about a win-win answer?
I love it.
Yes.
Back to an earlier point, it occurs to me that Briseis talks a lot about Achilles.
Yes.
The thing was, Achilles' lament is more all-consuming because he's the largest, larger than the largest of the larger-than-life heroes.
Yes.
And in fact, Briseis talks a lot about him even while she's lamenting Patroclus.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
so I agree with that.
And it's so weird for us moderns when Briseis sings, "Oh, Patroclus, you were so nice. You said you'd talk Achilles into marrying me." Well, in a sense, Achilles is not much of a lover in the Iliad. We have good reason to think that he was a much more attractive prize for women to want as a husband in other versions. I think of the Carly Simon song, "You're So Vain," where the words go, and all the girls, they dreamed that they'd be your partner. They'd be your partner. You're so vain, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Very clever. She composed her own songs, the words of her own songs, Carly Simon did. But moving away from Carly Simon back to Briseis, I'm saying that she is such a true to form lamenter. We really see not only her personal lament, but how it could possibly relate to Achilles. And we got just a glimpse of how attractive Achilles might be as a husband, even though that's not our first impression in our version of the Iliad. But again, we must remember that our version of the Iliad and how we see the Iliad is so deprived of all the other dimensions that ancient Greek culture must have been perfectly aware of. And that is a much more attractive potential husband for Achilles.
There's the point has also been made on the forum here about how she's described as looking like a goddess.
Oh yes, and not just a goddess, but a very special goddess, Aphrodite. So this is an instance of how lament is a very erotic as well as sad art form. That wasn't a good parallel, eroticism and sadness. I'll try to say it some other way. Let me think it through. How's this? That a lament can be a love song as well as a song that concentrates on the sadness over the loss of something or somebody.
Does that, comparing to a goddess, signal that this is something?
Yeah. Oh, yes. I like to say, especially to those who love opera, that this shows you that when a diva sings a centerpiece of an aria, that song may be very sad, but it's also very erotic, and that is signaled quite blatantly in the way Briseis and her song are introduced, I think, in our Iliad.
Well, let's move on to our third question.
Okay.
While we still have a few minutes. The question is, from Philostratus and other sources, we get the distinct impression that the ancient Greeks had sentimental feelings about the heroes they worshipped. Do you see any traces of such sentimentality in the Iliad and Odyssey? I can easily imagine, this is Greg, the I. Greg
Yes.
can easily imagine why you would answer either yes or no.
That was encouraging, wasn't it? And it encourages win-win answers again.
That's right. What did folks have to say here?
So now the question is, the burning question is, are our participants encouraged or are they discouraged?
Okay, so one of the points here that someone's picked up is that there are so many deaths described in the Iliad, and is wondering if maybe some of these are at least our local cult heroes who would have been the local people would have had that longing for, or had that sentimental feeling for. And particularly because there's a lot of attention paid to rituals, and it's that connecting to where they were buried is an important aspect, isn't it?
Yes. And may I make a comment on that? I think the way Sarah reported on the participants' reaction, and the way you, dear Sarah, reported on your own reaction, just makes me think even more how strange it is that heroes who are wounded in the Iliad therefore die. They don't get crippled. They don't get to be the very sad results of war that we know from our own experience, our own historical experience, or even real experience with wars. They simply die, and they simply die because they have to die as characters who will then be worshipped as dead people for the post-heroic generation. So it's not realistic, is what I'm saying, is how people get horribly wounded, because the wounds never result in survival. They just have to die. So unrealistic. And yet the non-realism that once you're wounded, you're going to die, shows us that the main function of death is how to look at the death of heroes from our post-heroic point of view, not in real life, where in a real life war, the veterans who come home may be horribly wounded, having traumas, physical or psychic, that they suffer with for the rest of their lives, and other people suffer with them. All of that is not there.
That's really interesting, Greg. So part of the function of the epic would be to show how we got to worship this person and this person.
Exactly. Yes. And that's such an overriding concern that we tend to forget that in real wars, there are a lot of people who just get horribly maimed and suffer for a long time afterwards. They don't necessarily die there on the spot. You don't even have lingering deaths. People just die on the spot.
And even the attempt, as somebody's pointed out, even the attempt to mutilate Hector's body doesn't work.
Oh, it doesn't work. Absolutely. So mutilation is contradictory to how heroes are supposed to look once they become cult heroes, which is their beautiful corpses. And you can think of their beautiful death as physically realized in the presence of a beautiful corpse, even though it may only be something imagined, but that piece of imagination is extremely important for the whole worldview of what heroes are.
And people do get wounded who don't die, but they seem to magically be healed right away.
Or that,
almost.
Sure. I'm just saying that there's no suffering from wounds after the wounding.
Right.
There's either some kind of instant fix or
yeah, no one is
or death,
suffering from a wound they received in book, or
that's what I'm
trying.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Someone once also talked about when Hector's body comes home and how everyone's all crowding around, weeping and lamenting, but also trying to touch his body, and almost getting a preview of that.
Yes, because it's already a talisman of all the good things that can happen from the worship of heroes, which is a practice that's so anchored in the idea that the body has to be there, lodged in, we hope, Mother Earth. We hope. In the case of Achilles, it's adopted Mother Earth.
Well, I think we should end there. Thanks again.
Wow. Yes, it's so sad. It's so sad, but I hope that the kinds of responses that the five of us were experimenting with are a source of, I think, encouragement. They should be a source of encouragement to the participants, because I think they're thinking in very good directions. And these are not easy questions, but in a sense, there's more than one answer to most of them. And I think we've touched a lot of bases during this conversation. I particularly enjoyed it.
All right. Thank you. See you all next time.
Thank you all.
Thank you.